What is up, guys? Doc in Progress here, coming at you with part 2 of a 2-part series. In the first part, I kind of talked about my dedicated schedule, how I went about it, and now I want to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of the practice exams I took. As we already spoke about, I did all of the UWorld question bank. Very important to do, so I would advise that you do that too. I don't think leaving any undone is a smart idea. Beyond that though, the most important things you can do for your score is to take NBME practice exams and the UWorld practice exams. Both do cost money. When you buy UWorld, you get 2 practice exams, which are the 2 you do. And NBME practice exams also cost money. I can't remember exactly how much. I think it was $40 a piece, something like that. And during my period, I probably had different tests than you. I was in a weird transition period. Prior to my year, there was a set of practice exams that had been available for 10 plus years. During my year, they started transitioning some of those old exams out and adding new exams. And now you guys have some of the exams I had, plus new ones. And depending on when you're watching this, maybe you have a new set, even beyond the new set I'm thinking of. But this is the basic principle, and this is what I did. So we'll go over the NBME practice exams and the UWorld practice exams in the order I took them, and we'll go over the scores I got, because I feel that that's important for you guys to know, so you can see the way I kind of went about from score to score to score, and how I scored in the end of things, and how that kind of correlated. Now, obviously, each of us has a different starting point, so I don't want you to feel like you need to mimic me in any way, or that you need the scores on those first exams, or the exams in general that I got to get the score I got. We all have a different path, so just kind of follow the journey. But the basic principle here is you want to see an upward trajectory. You don't want to really plateau, although, as you'll see from me, I kind of was at a plateau-ish. But really, the thing you don't want the most is a decline. Upward trending is the best, plateau is but then decline is no-go. If you see a decline, you should kind of readjust and kind of see what you can tackle and how you can improve that score. The NBME practice exams are gold, so are the UWorld practice exams, but the NBME practice exams are really kind of how you know where you're at. If you're consistently scoring a certain score, it's likely that you will either score that or above, not below, which is a good thing to know. You like to know where your kind of floor is, because you don't want your floor to be low. You prefer your floor to be at a great place and then score above that floor. So basically, I'm going to be looking at my phone and telling you exactly which exams I took in what order. So I took NBME 16, UWorld 1, NBME 20, NBME 21, NBME 22, NBME 18, UWorld 2, and NBME 120. Now, those were the order that I took them in. As I spoke about in my Step 1 study schedule video, I actually took the first practice exam 1 week before dedicated started. So that was NBME 16. In my mind, NBME 16 or NBME 17, if you have access to them still, are good practice exams to start with. They're not too hard, not too easy, but they sit in a good place, and I feel that they're both quite similar. So doing either or is okay. You don't have to do both. I chose to do 16. You can choose to do either 16 or 17, and if you have more time, do 16 and 17. But I only did 16. The first score I got 1 week before dedicated was a 252 on that. Every practice exam thereafter I took on a Friday of my dedicated period. Every Friday I took a practice exam. The only test where I didn't follow that was NBME 120, which I happened to take as my last exam, and I took it on the Wednesday before my test, and my test was on a Monday. So that Wednesday before, I took the NBME 120, good to go. So that weekend, the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I could just relax kind of before my test. I did do Anki, you know, as always, but I felt that it gave me a good buffer to kind of relax a little, get my headspace in the right area before taking the exam, versus having to do a practice exam on the last Friday before my test, which might psych me out or, you know, burn me out a little bit. I didn't want that. So basically, every Friday I took a test. So the first Friday, before, I guess it's the Friday before dedicated technically, because I'm counting dedicated as starting on a Monday. But basically, on that Friday, the last day of classes, I took UWorld 1, and I reviewed it on Friday, Saturday, a little bit on Sunday, but I wanted a more relaxing weekend before starting true dedicated. As you can see from the study schedule that I provided you, I kind of noted it down there, and if you want to, you can write in a specific one ones I actually took. But hopefully this makes sense because you can follow along with that. So I took UWorld 1 the Friday before of dedicated starting, and I got a 264 on that. UWorld tends to overpredict what you get, and the NBMEs tend to underpredict. At least that's the trend I've seen from talking with my friends. Obviously online there are humongous threads talking about how people scored on the practice exams and how they scored on the real thing. But from my personal experience, the NBMEs were a little bit harder than the real thing, or even if they weren't harder necessarily, the score you got was lesser for one reason or another. It obviously is shorter than the real thing, so maybe there's less questions to buffer you. That might be the reason. There are certainly co-founders, but yeah, so UWorld 1, a 264. And then after UWorld 1, I took NBME 20. On NBME 20, I had a 252 on that. And then I took NBME 21 after that and scored a 255. NBME 22 was the exam I took after that one, and I got a 250 on that. And to just take a brief pause there, I would recommend that no matter what practice exams you have available to you, you do at least the most recent ones. The most recent ones are important to do because they're the most relevant to you. Some of the older ones are extremely outdated, 13, 14, 15. All of those are insanely outdated, and some of the answer choices are actually wrong because of that. So just keep that in mind. So as I said, NBME 22 I got a 250, which was a little tiny bit of a decline than the lowest score I had gotten at that point, and that kind of freaked me out a bit. So what I did personally is then I took actually a full week to do more UWorld questions versus doing UWorld questions and then taking another exam on that following Friday, like that trend. I actually took the exam on a Monday. My schedule that I wrote out for you still puts that exam on a Friday because I expect that you guys won't necessarily have the same circumstance as me there, but I wanted to make sure that I did more UWorld questions so that the next test I took, I wouldn't have that issue, and that I'd score at least a 252 on the next test. So I took NBME 18 next on that Monday, and I got a 252. So my method worked. And take that as a lesson that you should kind of be versatile and deviate where you need to, but try to stick to a good schedule, because that's the only deviation I ever took in my entire schedule and my entire dedicated. So, as I said, NBME 18, a 252. And then that Friday, I went back to my regular schedule. I took UWorld 2, which is the test I do recommend you take last, or at least have it be the penultimate test, because UWorld 2 will boost your ego a little bit, but it also does test you. But you need that little boost of energy before you take the real thing so that you're confident in yourself. So UWorld 2 should be the second to last exam you take. I personally scored a 277 on that. So nearly perfect score on that one. Made me feel great. Good bounce back from that 250 that I scored. And then I took NBME 120 that Wednesday. So it's the Wednesday before my test, which was on the Monday. NBME 120, I got a 90% on that. And those were all the practice exams I took. Like I spoke about in my other video on my Step 1 study schedule, I felt like the real thing was a mixture between both the UWorlds and the NBMEs. Specifically for me, I felt it was a good mixture between UWorld 2 and NBME 120. For my Step 1 score reaction, you know, then I scored a 266 on the real thing, which the score kind of was in the range of, you know, my UWorlds and my NBME scores. Obviously, like I said, the NBMEs kind of underestimated my real score, and my UWorlds, or at least UWorld 2, overestimated it. But I think that, you know, obviously I'm happy where I fell, and I think it's reasonable to think that if you're scoring something on the NBMEs, you'll score at least that, if not higher. The most important thing, though, is to be confident in yourself, be confident in your scores. You saw that I plateaued, but also my plateau was kind of at a high plateau, and I started very high, and I increased on my UWorld 2s, I increased on some of the NBMEs, but I was around the same range for the NBMEs basically the whole time, and that's because I was very dedicated to Anki. You might start out at a 214, doesn't matter. The end game is what matters and where you get to. Like I said, you don't want to plateau at like a 222 because then that's your floor, 222. But if you plateau at somewhere that you feel comfortable, then okay. But you generally want to see an increase in your scores. So I hope that was helpful. I have a ton of people always asking me about these NBMEs and which ones they should take and what order. And generally speaking, I don't think it matters. I will say though that if you have NBME 19 available or anything before NBME 16 available to you, don't take any of those. 19 is really hard and just a soul crusher and a demoralizer and not worth your time. You'd be better off taking one of the newer exams. Anything before NBME 16 is too outdated for you to be taking. And yeah, guys, I really hope that was helpful. Please let me know if you have any questions. And keep chugging on. Dedicated is a tough period. I know you guys are all disciplined though, and you'll get through it. And I want you to trust me when I say everything after step 1 is so much better. Clinical years are great when you really get to interact with patients, and keep that as the light at the end of the tunnel, all right? So good luck, guys, and keep going.